Welcome to the 615 Locker Room Podcast. I'm your host, Wormy, with my co host, Uncle Matt here. We talk Nashville sports. First off, I want to say sorry. I checked before we started this. We haven't uploaded in 2 weeks, which is obviously never the goal. But one week, I just now started feeling better. I was like super sick, coughing every 10 seconds. It would have been terrible for recording. I actually went back to the last video that we uploaded, Matt, and I was like muting myself to cough even then. So
Mhm.
it was bad. And then I actually graduated college recently. You'll probably notice the different background. I'm back home for the time being. Excuse the mess. I'm still getting settled in. So that's the whole thing that, I couldn't record because I was trying to make that huge transition. Wearing the graduation gift that my girlfriend got me, it says my name and the year I graduate on the back. It's pretty sick. So shout out her if she's listening. Um, but yeah, we apologize for that. That's mostly on me. It should be back to normal programming after Matt gets back from vacation, which we'll touch on a little bit later. But so with that being said, I was sick and graduating, so I didn't get to catch a lot of these games. So I'm gonna have to lean on Matt. Unfortunately for him, but probably better for y'all. He normally provides the better insight. But I did watch most of the Nashville versus Chicago game, and holy 7-2. That that was a club record for us for most goals in a half, right? Because we had five at halftime, right?
Yeah, I think that was close. I think we were actually one goal off of like total. I think our with the Chicago goals, I think it was the most goals scored in an MLS match total, and we were like one goal off from being the most goals scored by one team in a match in the first
Mm-hmm.
half. The five goals, I think, was yeah, like you said, either tied a record or broke a record. So quite the offensive output performance from Nashville SC in that one.
Yeah, and as this is honestly like I feel like this is gonna for the listeners at home. I feel like this is gonna be kind of a quick catch up episode because this game happened. It feels like to me forever ago. So we may not have the best insight to some of this stuff because we technically have 3 games to cover here. Um, so if it's a bit short on our side, we apologize, but it's been forever since we've been able to sit down and actually record. That's just what you'll get this week. We'll improve it. But um, yeah, watching that game, obviously, offensively, we we were pretty great. We were facing the old or the guy that BJ was under at the U.S. men's national team. So that was a cool little like history relationship thing to see play out on my end. I actually didn't know much about this, but I heard Matt talking about it and he educated me on it. So that was a cool thing to see, and it was sort of mentee beats mentor situation. Um, it would have been nice to get a clean sheet there, but even as it's happening, I was like, Joe Willis is going to give up one. He has to. It's Joe Willis. Um, but you were there, Matt. I wasn't able to make it to this game. Unfortunately, I had originally planned to. What was it like in Geodis with us scoring 7 goals?
Yeah, so Geodis Park, I mean, it was kind of almost like stunned more than like, hype reaction, especially about like the third or fourth goal. Everybody was just kind of looking around at each other like, what is happening right now? Is this like real life? Like, you're just kind of like, especially like, I think maybe even because of like the being in the VAR era where you're just kind of looking around like, well, something's got to happen here. This can't possibly be like really happening. Like, what is, especially because like, they were, relatively easy goals, I would say. Like, we pretty much were just going over the top, long balls, and either then whipping back across, or whipping across, back across, or just, two of them, I think, were just long balls to Sam, and then a couple penalties as well. So it was just kind of like I remember, like, I think in the video that I had from the game, I'm literally in the first goal, I'm like, we scored, and I was barely in my seat. I don't even know what's happening here. And then, like, I think I was like still recording one goal reaction video, and another goal goes in. So it was combination of like amped and hype for the goals, but also a little bit of just kind of shock because like Yeah, from the Gary Smith era to now, like to score 7 goals in one game, that's not something Nashville SC fans are very used to. Obviously, I mean, like we said, it's kind of a historical number just overall in MLS. But for us especially, where we've seen a lot of 0-0, 1-1 games over the years, that was quite something, and kind of had everybody kind of like looking around at each other, like, what is going on? What is this team? And I mean, it was kind of, what we've been. I mean, 7 goals is never going to be what you expect a team to do, but I mean, you look at how many chances we've been creating and just kind of not being able to finish as many as we'd like to see. Um, it kind of was like the opposite of a couple of the games this season where we've just had a million chances and couldn't score. We had a million chances and scored all of them in this game. So it was just everything fell right for once, and it was a fun night at Geo's Park. One of the most fun nights we've had there.
I do like. I do have a question about sort of in the sense of like, um, interesting to watch. I mean, whenever you get up, I forget what the exact score was, but we were probably 4 or 5 up before they scored one. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
the competition level goes down a lot. So, do you feel like you like lose interest in a game like this whenever it's such a blowout on our side as much as like whenever you lose interest whenever we're getting blown out? Because like at a certain point, I was like, I can turn it off, not miss anything. I know we're gonna win. That's kind of how I feel in like games like this. Is like the competition goes down, so it's a little less entertaining to watch. I'm grateful for the 7-2 win, but I want to hear, a veteran soccer enjoyer, what you kind of think about stuff like this.
It's probably a little different, like being in the stadium than being
Mm-hmm.
like, if I was watching this at home, because like I've definitely had that where I've been watching, um, even not just soccer, but other sports, football, baseball, whatever, and like your team gets up by a comfortable amount, and maybe instead of just staying put on the couch and watching the rest of the game, you're like, oh well, I needed to get some dishes done, or oh, I'm hungry, I'm gonna go whip up some food or something. So you kind of step away a little bit, and being at the stadium, I mean, there was probably some people, especially like if you got kids or something like that, who are like, okay, we can probably hit the road and beat traffic or something like that, but it was kind of a weird one where it was like maybe that was the feeling maybe around like 3-0 or 4-0, but then like once they get to like 5-0, you're almost kind of like, how many goals can we score here? Like what's the end game here? How many are we going to put up here? So it kind of became almost interesting again. And I think one of the reasons that we really scored as many goals as we did is like, typically like you go back to our game against Seattle, where they got up 3-0. They had a very similar, output like to us, where it's just like a burst where like the goals all came in about a 15-minute window. BJ Callahan didn't make some adjustments. We go to a back five defense, set up shop a little bit more to try to just play a little more compact and play a little more defensively and kind of, you know, no, we probably are kind of out of the game, but also don't want to just get completely humiliated. Chicago didn't really do that. They kind of kept their setup. They played the way they wanted to play the entire match, and that was one of the things I said in like the post game and like in some talking about it on some of my live streams was I thought it was really impressive that BJ Callahan had scouted out what the best way to attack them was just to go long over the top because their defense wasn't particularly fast. And they really didn't do much to change that or counteract it. So it kind of just left the door open where it's like, okay, you're not going to switch it up. You're just going to keep letting us do what we're doing. We'll just keep doing it. And that's how you end up with 7 goals in a match like that. So, yeah, it was definitely like a little bit of a, okay, we're comfortable here. This is a good game. But then all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute, how many are we going to score here? Let's keep this going. Can we hit 8? Can we hit 9? Can we hit 10? And then it gets kind of fun again after that.
Yeah, I feel like in a game like this, like I mean, it's not like an open cup where we're playing, a league below us. Like we're relatively on the same level of skill and competition. So I think this was probably like a pure, you know, one manager is out managing the other person. Which is super cool to know the backstory behind it. It's super cool to see our new manager who honestly has been he's been a shining light to the organization compared to the Gary Smith. So it's just a super cool game to see. I think that it brought life to us after some other games that brought us down just a tad bit. Um, I wish I was texting my girlfriend. I was like, man, we should have been there. because I imagine that the electricity in the stadium was just extremely high. Um, before we move on to Atlanta game, do you have anything else you want to add to that?
No, I mean we hit it pretty well and covered up pretty much everything that I can really recall from that game. It was just it's really impressive because I mean it, like I said a little bit, wasn't just scoring that many goals, but that it was I think you going back and like kind of reading some of the breakdowns and everything afterwards, it was pretty clear that it wasn't like we just kind of came out of nowhere and scored. It was kind of a pretty good
Mm-hmm.
tactical plan that BJ Callahan brought to the table, which is two coaches like you mentioned with the history they have together, to kind of one up your former mentor, shows that, feel like we're in good hands with the hire we made there, it seems like.
Yeah, I mean that had to be a good feeling for BJ. It's always good to outsmart your professor. I mean, um, even and the respect is obviously still going to be there. And I know even in your video you're still like, hey, shout out, shout out. I still support you, but yeah. So these next two games that we're going to cover, I'm going to heavily lean on you. The Nashville versus Atlanta 1-1 outcome. I This was the day that I graduated college, and so I obviously was very checked out of what was happening. I had my phone propped up at like family dinner trying to catch what was happening, but this was another Dan Lovett's goal. Uh, but if you can tell us a bit about our form, how we looked, and what you think we could have done better, that would be perfect.
Yeah, it was an interesting game because it's, we're talking about how things are changing, some of the stuff that BJ Callahan's bringing to the table, to the differences from like the Gary Smith era to this era. And like I think this was one game where I saw something I don't know that I've ever seen happen before for a Nashville SC team. Was Atlanta was almost playing like a little bit of Gary ball. Like they were sitting pretty deep. They were getting like 11 players behind the ball. They were pretty content to just, sit deep and absorb pressure and try to beat us on the counterattack. Like, which, teams do that sometimes, more so on the road. Like that was what was very surprising about it, was for a team home game. You got players like Miguel Almiron. They've got the most expensive signing in MLS history, and their new striker. I call him Latte Latte, but that's not exactly what his name is. It's a little pronounced different. I can't remember what it is, but you got some really solid attacking players. So for them to kind of just sit back and you know really kind of try to hold down the fort, is a good sign of what Nashville SC's doing, and it kind of frustrated us, and I think it caught us off guard a little bit in the first half because BJ stuck with Jacob Schaffelberg, who had a really good game against Chicago. But when the team was sitting as deep as Atlanta was, that kind of unfortunately neutralizes, Schaffelberg's main skill set, which is his speed going over the top. But
Mm-hmm.
they were sitting so deep, he wasn't able to quite, get in behind and do as much damage as he did against Chicago. And I thought BJ did a good job adjusting that second half. Like their goal, is kind of really their only really good scoring opportunity they had the entire match. So, that's, the unfortunate nature of soccer. Sometimes you give up one opportunity and the team scores, and you just have to live with that, and that's what happened there. But I thought BJ was smart with his changes in the second half. Switched out Schaffelberg for Kassam, where Kassam's a little bit more going to come back and link up play with the rest of the team. Try to move the ball around, spread the other team out a little bit more, as opposed to just direct straight running like you get from Schaffelberg. So we made some good adjustments. Looked a lot better in the second half. Kind of a little bit more what we'd been seeing in the build up to the Chicago match, where we started creating chances but just not quite finishing them. But overall, it's one where if you look at, kind of the overall kind of arching of the season and you say, hey, you got to draw at Atlanta, you'd probably be like, I can take that. I can be content with that. That's a result I'll take, because they haven't had the best start to the season, but the talent they have, they've got a pretty good coach. He's got a pretty good track record. So you kind of feel like they're gonna get it sorted out, get it figured out at some point in time. And I even said kind of in the pregame, I was like, I really hope this isn't the game where they kind of get their stuff figured out, because that's kind of what happened to us with Seattle, where they'd had a little bit of a slow start to the season and then everything clicked into place when they got to play us. So unfortunately, like, Atlanta looked a little better than they have this season. I think they hadn't scored in like 3 straight games coming into that one. So even getting one goal was like a big improvement for them. But I thought our second half adjustments, the way we came out, was pretty good. And you mentioned the Dan Lovett's goal. Like, I think like, if you, another thing, just kind of peel back and kind of give a bigger picture perspective on the season so far, we've got multiple set pieces goals from Josh Bauer, Dan Lovitz, Jackson Palacios, and like so if you told me we had like 5 or 6 set piece goals and like none of them were from Walker Zimmerman, who used to be the only guy who could ever do anything on set pieces for us, I'd be like, we must be doing something getting those chances from other players, and that's one of the it's always been the big talk is we need somebody to score goals other than Henny Mukhtar. And now, like, I wasn't expecting Dan Lovitz, Josh Bauer, and Jackson Palacios to be the ones who necessarily were stepping up to the plate for that. But I mean, that's huge to be able to get goals in different ways and different opportunities because outside of Walker, set pieces have been kind of a disaster for Nashville SC. Because I swear, I think at one point in time, I think the official statistic was Hani Mukhtar hit the front first defender on I want to say like 97 straight corners at one point in time. I don't. That's probably not a real number, but it felt like it at one point in time that he just the first cross hit the first defender every single time on every corner he took. So to be able to like get some better delivery, have more people that are kind of attacking the ball and getting on the end of some of these chances is it's a good sign because sometimes you get a tight game. You look ahead to MLS Cup playoffs where you're going to be in a lot of tight games, a lot of grind out games. To be able to kind of steal a goal or find ways to score goals and other opportunities, I think that's another one that's got me pretty. I'm trying to be cautiously optimistic. I think like the
Mhm.
last couple seasons when we kind of weren't very good, I was overly optimistic and I'm just kind of like putting on too much of a bright and cheery face. But now I'm like kind of going the opposite way, where I'm like, we're having a pretty good season, and I'm like, well, let's not get ahead of ourselves. It's good, but let's wait and see how it all keeps going. But I'm cautiously optimistic that so many of the things we needed to get from this team for this team to take a step forward have kind of seemed to happen. So Dan Lovitz, people like that starting to score goals is just another little boost in the right direction.
Yeah, and I like not watching this game, but just taking the whole season into consideration. I mean, I think one of the I guess proudest points of the season that I've been as a fan for the team has definitely been that you know we haven't just seen one or two guys scoring goals because obviously your striker is going to score and your I mean, in soccer, your wingers maybe. In our case, obviously Mukhtar, but I mean, we've seen almost every position in the field pretty much score a goal. Um, just about. Beside, I don't think we've seen like a true like center back playing in that game score, but Josh Bauer, who has been designated as one of our right backs, who is a true center back, has been scoring. But I think that's one of the most happy like parts of the season that I've been is just because that means that we are working as a team rather than relying on our two or three pieces to score those goals consistently. Um, and then obviously speaking of Josh Bauer, he got a goal last night in our Open Cup game, which was apparently streamed on Paramount Plus, which I'm not a subscriber, so I wasn't able to watch that one either. I know you were there, so a lot of people were expecting a lot more goals. From what I can tell through like the online groups, which is fair. We're playing a league below us, but what was the gameplay like there? I know we played a lot of uh, experimental rotation. Our guys who normally aren't going to be starters. What did you take from there? Was there any standouts besides Josh Bauer in that match?
Yeah, I mean, I thought everybody, played pretty well. It was definitely a little disjointed, a little bit like there wasn't as smooth, as much rhythm, which is, to be expected. Like, I think out of that group, really the one who's played the most minutes was probably just Ahmad Kassam. Josh Bauer started a couple games when Andy Nahar was away with his national team, but the rest of the group out there was kind of, heavily rotated and people who either hadn't played at all or if they had, it just been a few minutes. I mean, Brian Acosta, his first start of the season, he had just gotten his first minutes recently. Chris Applewhite, the homegrown player who's come off the bench the 2 games prior, gets his first start. So it was a lot of different, and like even the players who had played some more you're playing with a completely different group of players. It's not like, what we've been seeing with most of the matches where we're pretty consistent with the 11 we're putting out with, maybe 1 to 2 changes depending on injuries, in national team stuff like that. So it was a little bit disjointed, a little bit, not as smooth as what we've seen from the team so far this season. Which was not too surprising. I did think they probably would have scored more goals just because Chattanooga is quite a bit lower on the totem pole than Nashville SC should be, even if it's a mostly backup reserve Nashville SC team. But just we had a lot of possession, we had a lot of good stuff on the ball. Just kind of we didn't seem to be finding that last pass, that last opportunity to get the ball into a scoring position. So it was like kind of lacking, whatever we've been getting that's been creating so much with the kind of the first choice players this season, which is kind of funny that the way we scored the goal was Josh Bauer just stepped up and just like, I'm just going to kick the crap out of the ball and just rip a shot. It was like, I don't need 3 extra passes or I don't need to find the perfect opening. I'm just going to hit this ball as hard as I can and hope for the best. And that was how we scored the goal. But I thought Johnny Perez had a pretty good game. He had some nice dribbles where he took some guys on and beat him pretty good. He got the fan base going a little bit of time on a couple of his movements. Otherwise, everybody else was just kind of there, just kind of it's a very, very lackluster game. Not a whole lot to take from it, I would say.
Yeah, I saw. I don't know if you used the Foot Mob app at all. Um, but it gives basically like real time updates, real time stats. I saw, I saw Wyatt Meyer ended up having like one of the highest rated like performances of the match, apart from Bauer who scored the goal. Um, which I love to see the young guys have get their flowers. So if there's like any way I can go back and watch, I'd like to pay attention to him, see what he does. I know early in the season he played was it like the first 2 games, I believe.
Hmm.
And he
Yeah, him
did
and
Cochran.
him and Matt Cochran both started the first 2 games in midfield for us when we were still getting Yaz back and I believe Brugman back from injuries at that point in time, and they've both kind of been out of the picture since then. I mean, Cochran I think is like only 17 or 18 years old, and
Mm-hmm.
Myers just graduated college or just come out of college, so he's I believe like 23 or 24. So young players, I think the thing that was interesting about Meyer, seeing what he's done so far is the first 2 games you mentioned, he started in midfield. This game he started as a center back, but then when Taylor Washington had to go off with an injury, he shifted out to left back. So that's if you got a player like that, kind of similar to Josh Bauer, who can play a little bit of right back, a little bit of center back, the more players you have like that who can kind of fill multiple roles for you, the more that opens you up to be able to kind of invest your money, make your signings on other positions. So, he basically fills 3 roles on the depth chart as a
Mm-hmm.
backup center mid, a backup center back, and a backup left back, apparently, too. So, and he
Mm-hmm.
played solidly pretty much, at his point. He's like, thinking back to those first 2 games, he's not going to be the guy that's going to make the spectacular, like, unlock the defense type of pass like you get sometimes from Yazbek or Brugman or
Mm-hmm.
those, but he's really just solid. He's just a really solid performance. Just he's good on the ball, doesn't make a whole lot of mistakes. Just was pretty tidy in possession. So he's got some good potential. Like him and Cochran both, I think, could be players who grow into bigger roles over the next year or two for Nashville SC. But yeah, that was kind of one of the things that was fun to watch about the game is just seeing some players we haven't seen, seeing
Yeah.
what they do out there. It was kind of a good opportunity for that for BJ to get some fresh legs in there and kind of give some guys the opportunity who haven't had that many minutes yet this season and kind of see where they're at and where they can go. I think I just saw maybe earlier today we've now been drawn for the next round. We're taking on Orlando City,
Mm-hmm.
so now we're moving up and taking on fellow MLS competition. So I would think the next round you'll see a little bit of a stronger team than we saw in this one because BJ has said he's going to take the U.S. Open Cup very seriously and he's going to play to win it because that's a good opportunity for Nashville to get a cup. So
Mm-hmm.
we'll see there. Orlando City, I believe, is who put us out the last time we were in U.S. Open Cup. So a little bit of history there. Orlando is one of those teams. I feel like we've played them like 100 times. Like I don't know why. It just feels like we've played them like 10 extra times than any other team. But yeah, that should be a fun one coming up. I don't know when exact date for that is, but that should be an interesting little bit step up in competition for the next round.
Yeah, I was trying to look up the date before we started, and I'm not sure if it's been exactly confirmed yet. I didn't know that Taylor Washington got injured. How serious was that?
It's hard to tell. I haven't seen anything official on it yet. It was one of
Mm.
those where he was down and it was right in front of where we were sitting, and I don't think I recorded any of it just because I don't know. It feels like a weird thing to record. Is like a
Yeah.
guy kind of down in that situation. It's one of those where you could tell he was pretty upset, and it was usually like when the players are reacting a certain way, you can kind of tell that they know something's way wrong. So we were sitting there thinking, did he really mess up his knee or his ankle or something like that? Because he was like kind of pounding the ground, like really frustrated, really upset.
Mm.
But he eventually got up. He limped off. They walked him up and down the sidelines a couple times to see how much mobility he could go. And then pretty quickly he was like, nah, I can't. They had to uh, make the signal to the bench for them to bring on, I believe, Jack Myers, who came. I can never pronounce his name right. He came in for him, and that's when White Myers shifted out the left back. But Taylor went and sat back on the bench with the rest of the team. A lot of times when you've got like a really bad injury, sometimes either walk or get stretchered off the field to the locker room to start getting treatment immediately. But he went to the bench and sat with the team for at least the rest of the first half. I can't remember if he came back out for the second half or not. But I mean, it looked really bad at first, and then the fact that he kind of stuck around and didn't leave the bench area kind of gave me a little bit of hope that maybe it was not too bad. But obviously, a guy like Taylor Washington, like he's not the type of dude who's going to come off unless it's a something that he has to come off for, especially because he's not a guy who gets a ton of minutes. So any chance he gets to be on the field, he's going to want to stay out there. So I haven't heard or seen anything more detailed. I think BJ's press conference is usually on Thursday, so I guess that would probably be the next time we get kind of an update on what's going on with him. But it was kind of a mixed signals because he looked really upset and frustrated
Mm.
initially when he was down and getting the initial treatment. But then the fact that he stuck around and stayed out in the field and didn't like go back to the locker room for treatment kind of I thought was a good sign that maybe it's bad enough to take him out of the game, but not like season ending or anything
Mm.
like that. So hopefully if it's something just small, he's out for a couple weeks or so and can
Yeah.
get back into the squad because I believe he is in the last year of his contract right now with Nashville SC. I don't
Mm.
know that one way or the other that he would be back just because he's kind of a veteran backup player. That's kind of the positions that you kind of reset and shuffle around over time, but certainly would hate to see like his Nashville SC career, if it is his last year with us, end with him out with a big injury or something like that. So hopefully it's not too bad. It's something he can come back from and get some more minutes for us as the season progresses.
Yeah, and it always sucks to hear, about one just anyone on your team getting injured is terrible, but a guy like Taylor Washington, I mean, he's not doing too much on the pitch. I mean, he hasn't seen it in a regular game at all this season, I don't think. But he's a huge like I feel like he's a good locker room guy. Two, he does a lot of like media for Nashville, so I feel like that
Mm-hmm.
connects us more. And he just seems like a good-hearted person off the field, from what I can tell. Obviously, everything that someone in that position wants us to see, that's what we'll see, and anything they don't want us to see, we won't see. So, but it always sucks to see someone like that who you kind of feel like is undeserving of something like that for it to happen. So I wish him good health. I had no clue about that. But going against Orlando, I think we'll probably play a uh, more serious lineup than what we did this game. And hopefully, is all the Open Cups going to be streamed on Paramount? I'm assuming.
Yeah, I think they are the rights holders for those games, which is one thing you kind of run into with soccer more than like other sports is that there's a lot of different, each competition has its own like TV package, TV deal. So like in European soccer, Premier League games are on like USA Network and like NBC through their deal with like Universal. But
Mm-hmm.
then the FA Cup is on like ESPN Plus, and the Champions League is on like Paramount Plus. So they're all over the place a little bit there. But yeah, I think the entirety of the U.S. Open Cup is on Paramount Plus and not Apple TV, where most of the MLS games are.
I was promised no blackouts, and it's technically not MLS, but they're playing it here. So, um, but yeah, okay. So I'll probably have to invest in that. Stepping away from soccer a little bit, we were on the last episode. We were speculating. We are kind of talking about the NFL draft, which happened, and I was very tuned in this year. I was surprised how tuned in I was because normally I'm like I don't know any of these guys really. I'll catch them in the season. Um, the Titans got Cam Ward at one. How? I mean, do you still feel the same from last time? As like we should have done something else, or do you think that like okay, let's let's trust in this guy and see where we go?
Yeah, I thought the rest of the draft went pretty good in terms of the players we got elsewhere. So I it was that kind of made me feel a little bit better about the Cam Ward pick, just because I think if the players pan out at all, we filled a lot of needs. Um, One thing that whatever reason got me a little bit more encouraged about him in general is with his media appearances and with the media appearances that like our coach and our general manager and our team president and we're all doing in kind of the days after the draft. I thought you could tell that they were all bought in on him as the guy. Like they were, there was no, you know, wavering on that from their end of things, at least in the way they presented things. And, the quarterbacks we've had going back for a while, I don't know if there was ever a point that you could say that every single person in the organization was completely sold on who we had there. Like, the last couple of years with Will Levis, I think, I don't think probably Mike Vrabel or new coach Brian Callahan, either one really wanted him as the quarterback and just kind of got stuck with him a little bit. Um, Tannehill, I think there was probably some back and forth between different people in the organization about should he be the quarterback, and obviously his first year there when we still had Mariota, there definitely probably was a little bit of back and forth over which one of them should be the quarterback. So to at least have a guy that everybody's bought in on and everybody's sold on, that everybody's on the same page with, I think is a step in the right direction. And can only be good for, Cam Ward himself to, he's got that belief, he's got that backing. Because, I think Will Levis, he's got obviously the physical talents to be a good quarterback. It always seemed his issues were more, on the mental side of the game. Like, and, I don't know if you could ever really fix being bad at reading defenses, but when your confidence is low and you kind of also know in the back of your head your coaches probably don't have any confidence in you either, that's never going to rarely ever, if at all, going to result. Like think when is a quarterback, I guess maybe this is probably way before your time, but Trent Dilfer with the Ravens maybe is like the one quarterback who's won a Super Bowl where I think if the team had their choice, he would never have been their quarterback. They just kind of got stuck with him and had to roll with him. But most of the time, it's pretty good quarterbacks that the organization is behind that win Super Bowls. So, that gave me a little bit of encouragement. That gave me a little positivity, just seeing how clearly in on him the key decision makers for the team are. It's not like they just, because that was kind of my concern was like, are we just taking him because we just feel like we have to get a quarterback? Or are they trying to like do it as like a marketing tool because we got the new stadium opening in 2 years? Those are my concerns with drafting him as opposed to like maybe trying to pick up extra picks or move around or do something a little different. But, they clearly believe in him. They clearly think he's going to be a huge difference maker for the team. So I'm a little more positive on it than I probably was going into the draft. But
Mm-hmm.
the NFL draft is so just like unpredictable. The players, I mean, the greatest quarterback of all time is a 6th-round draft pick. So nobody knows what they're doing half the time of these. So, Cam Ward could be the next Patrick Mahomes, or he might never take a snap in the NFL if he just gets into camp and turns out he sucks or something like that. So
Mm-hmm.
we'll see. Once again, I'm a phrase I use a lot, cautiously optimistic.
Yeah. And that's something that I noticed too, like plot, like loosely trying to follow along, not really sure what I was looking at. I noticed that like a lot of the Titans media was super locked in with Cam Ward, it seemed, but at the same time, I, being sort of a realistic person myself, it's like, where are they going to come? They're not going to go take an interview and be like, maybe this guy's good, So we'll see how that plays out. I guess my question that I would have to you and to anyone else listening is that follows the NFL a bit more than me because I loosely follow it. I'm more of a college football guy. Uh, you know, my biggest question mark right now is Will Levis and where he plays into it because like obviously your draft guy is probably normally not gonna immediately start just because I feel like that's like the laws of physics and sports almost. However, I mean Will Levis I feel like has been pretty like terrible, and like everyone is pretty sold on him not being the guy. So I know they did the maybe as the coach or the owner did a conference. Sorry, that was like Will Levis is still the starting quarterback in the room. However, like you got to say stuff like that whenever you're in that position. What do you think we're gonna see in terms of like opening day?
Yeah, it'll be interesting because we've brought in some veteran quarterbacks, but nobody that really kind of, you look at and go, "Oh, that's a guy you're going to kind of let be the starter, let be the mentor to your new rookie quarterback." I don't I'd hate, I'm always kind of like back and forth on the debate of like, do you just throw the rookie in there and let them go, or do you let them sit and, develop? But with the quarterbacks we brought in, if like well, first of all, like you mentioned, I'm pretty sure them talking about Will Levis being in the mix to be the starter, to be in the that's coach speak because I don't see how he's on this roster by the start of the season. Just because as I mentioned earlier, it seems like one of the biggest issues he has is confidence, and what's going to kill your confidence more than knowing your replacement is sitting over there on the sideline just waiting for his opportunity to take your job. So there's a whole lot there that makes me like I don't know how you could. And they pretty much had given up on Will Levis last year, like he was getting benched for Mason Rudolph. So I don't know where they're like there's any positive, but I think they have to say, hey, we still want him. We're still going to develop him. We're still going to, because if you come out and say this guy sucks, we're going to try to trade him. You're killing any trade value he has because then they're going, oh, you think he sucks? Why would we give you anything for him? But I think it's also probably held up. Like there's, the Aaron Rodgers thing is still kind of lingering out there. Is he going to sign somewhere? Is he going to come back and play? So there's probably still a few teams that are kind of waiting for those dominoes to fall before they make the next kind of wave of moves with the quarterbacks. I would be, like I said, shocked. I don't see how he could be on the roster just because he's either going to be completely shot or mentally broken from having known he's already been replaced, or you know even possibly worst case scenario, if like maybe I don't know if worst case scenario, but maybe it lights a fire on him and all of a sudden he's like one of the best quarterbacks in the league, and then suddenly you're like, crap, we just drafted this other guy first overall draft pick. It's something similar. This is once again probably before your time, but Drew Brees was drafted by the Chargers. He was like a second round pick for them. Had just kind of mediocre first like 3 or 4 years, and so they draft Philip Rivers. Like uh, was the weird Eli Manning deal where they technically drafted Eli Manning first overall, and then the Giants drafted Philip Rivers, but Eli didn't want to go to San Diego, so eventually they just swapped, and Philip Rivers ends up there. And Philip Rivers sits his rookie year. Drew Brees stays and plays, and Drew Brees has like a career Pro Bowl year and looks like a superstar. They trade Drew Brees to the Saints, and he goes on to have the career he had down there, winning a Super Bowl and having a pretty good run. And Philip Rivers did fine in San Diego, but they didn't end up getting a Super Bowl there. So yeah, I just feel like you got to get him out of town before the season even starts. Just avoid any kind of weird deal with both of them being around. But at the same time, if he's not gone, the veteran quarterbacks we brought in like seem like they might be okay options as a backup, but I don't really see any of them as being like a good starter option. It kind of feels like we're moving more towards Cam Ward's just going to be the guy day one. But a lot can happen between now and then. There's probably a few more quarterbacks that are going to be on the market. Similar to us trying to move Will Levis, there could be some opportunities to bring in another more experienced, more proven quarterback to maybe play for a year or so. So we'll see. I think there's still some roster stuff that's going to be happening over the next couple months as we get a little closer to the actual season.
Yeah, I mean, just following along everything, I'm excited to see Cam Ward do his thing. I'm sure we get 3 preseason games in the NFL, right?
Hmm.
So I'm sure we'll see him do his performance there. So I'm just excited to see him in a Titans uniform and doing his thing. This is probably the most excited I've been to watch a Titans season, to be honest. I mean, I'm sure I touched on it in other episodes where we talked about like American football, but with I'm just the reason that like because college football and NFL, I mean it's basically the same stuff, but UTK being in like the same city as me, I just feel so much more connected. And now, having this show, talking to you, and then also following along with the draft and some of the more preseason stuff, I feel a bit more connected to the Titans. So I feel like I'm gonna enjoy watching it more. And then speaking of UTK Knoxville, I didn't realize how many of our like current roster was going into the draft this year. Uh, One, we lost Nico, which that's not due to the draft. That's due to whatever nonsense. But then we lost Dylan Sampson and James Pierce Jr. are like two biggest guys. So I'm a little nervous and scared to see uh, what we do going into this season and how we are. Uh, I don't know how many Vandy guys are declaring for the draft, but has there been any? Did any Vandy guys get drafted? Do you know?
I don't know off the top of my head. If anybody did, it wasn't like anything particularly high or notable for them this season.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I didn't recall like anybody. Like, we didn't have any like major, talent level people like Pierce, who like at one point in time like he was being talked about like even a top 5, top 10 level pick at different times. So we didn't have anybody quite to that level, but yeah, we may have had like we it feels like we always have like a safety get drafted in like the 5th round or something like that. So, but yeah, I don't off the top of my head, I don't know, but yeah, but to your point, like being a bigger UT fan and not following the Titans as closely, like it's probably been as much as I hate to admit it, that's probably been the best way to be the last couple of years because it's UT's had a
Yeah.
lot more success and it's been a lot more fun to probably cheer for them than it has the Titans in recent memory.
That's also
And I know there was
true.
like I know there was like a lot of UT fans that were kind of going back to Will Levis, kind of turned off by the Titans bringing him in because obviously like there's the
Kentucky.
rivalry with Kentucky and stuff like
Mm.
that, and so it's like we can't cheer for this Kentucky quarterback. This is bull crap and all this stuff. And it's like whatever, just
I it,
teach their own.
yeah, I didn't care about any. That's honestly Will Levis being at Kentucky probably like was a little bit before I even started following UTK football, so that wasn't a big deal. I wanted to circle back to the draft because this is something that I completely forgot. Uh, but Shedeur, I mean, we
Mm.
got to talk about him. Probably, arguably the biggest name in the draft. Going, what round did he end up? Like fifth or sixth?
Mm-hmm. 5th round to Cleveland.
Which, I mean, I hate to throw this around because it's ridiculous, but Tom Brady drafted fifth, sixth round. I mean, I don't think we're gonna see that, but we can't completely count this kid out. But to me, I mean, from an outsider looking in, not following it too much, I mean, I thought he was top 5 picks probably. From someone who followed it closer, were you surprised with where he landed? What did you think while this was being played out?
Yeah, it was weird because in the last like week or two, kind of leading up to the draft, it started to sound like that he was trending more towards potentially late 1st round, early 2nd round level. Whereas going back to during the season of most people were like going back and forth like between him and Cam Ward of who would be the first quarterback taken. Period. So it was definitely strange seeing him fall that far. But then like I heard a lot of stuff started to come out. Like there's
Mm-hmm.
talk that he was kind of blowing off interviews, not really putting his best foot forward because he thought maybe he was a little bit better than what teams thought he was. And then it was the way, it was explained is like, once he got past that kind of 2nd round kind of territory, suddenly you're drafting him probably as a backup quarterback. And do you want your backup quarterback to have all the attention and uh, level of stuff that comes with having him on your team? And so that kind of pushed him down again to the weirder part about it at the end was that the Cleveland Browns take Oregon quarterback Dylan Gabriel in like the 3rd round, which that was one of the spots where everybody's like, okay, this is the spot. They're going to take Shedeur here. They were one of the teams before the draft that was getting linked with them a lot just because they had the history and needed a quarterback, obviously. So, but then they go Dylan Gabriel, and it's like, oh, okay, well, clearly a sign that teams are really out on Shedeur Sanders. Oh, they're going Dylan Gabriel of all people. And then to come back and then draft Shedeur Sanders in the 5th round when you've already drafted Dylan Gabriel. That was the more like kind of head scratcher. Like, why do you need both these quarterbacks? Because they had a pretty good draft overall,
Hmm.
outside of that, but it was very bizarre for them to. It wasn't so bizarre for them to take him. It was bizarre that they took Dylan Gabriel first and then came back and took him later. So the whole thing was weird. I don't know that we'll ever get full details of all the craziness, whatever led to all of it, but it just seems like he wasn't maybe as good as the hype, and that kind of turned some teams off and just
Hmm.
moved him from like where he really was probably only about as talented as a second round pick to where okay, well he's talented as a second round pick, but let's we don't want to take him in the second round type thing. So yeah, it was definitely the story of the draft was him falling. I don't think I've ever seen anything like that in the NFL draft where a player who was, I mean, because like the biggest, slides previously was like Aaron Rodgers going from like top 5 to like pick 22 or something like that. And
Hmm.
Ben Roethlisberger was supposed to be like a pretty high pick and he ended up going like 15th. I don't know that we've ever seen like a full on like 5 round drop from a guy that some people thought might be like a top 5 pick. So it was definitely crazy and definitely what's the word I'm looking for? Unexpected, but yeah.
How much of that do you think was like teams realizing his true skill, or teams talking to him and just realizing like this guy's attitude is in the floor from what we need?
The attitude seemed to be a big part of it, and I think part of the other problem there is, and like this got brought up several times, is there's only so many teams that need a quarterback. So if those teams aren't interested in you, that's gonna kind of screw you over even more because there's 5, 6 teams that are looking for a quarterback. So if 4 of those teams decide either through a bad interview, through a bad training performance, that whatever reason they decide they're not interested in you, there's only so many opportunities there for you. And then, like I said kind of earlier, if then you're starting to get looked at as a backup quarterback, there's a lot of, well, do we really want our backup quarterback to like have his own reality show and like be putting out rap songs and have his dad probably talking about that we've got his son benched on like a press conference after a Colorado game on Saturdays. That kind of
Yeah,
I think is became the secondary thing beyond just like we don't think he's as talented as we'd like him to be. And then if we're looking at him as like a backup quarterback, we're like, we definitely don't want all this other stuff from our backup quarterback. So
yeah,
it was definitely interesting to see all that going down.
yeah, and I feel like that's like kind of tying that back into Nashville. I mean, it's obviously a different level, but some of our like depth of pieces now, and like having the issue in our group of depth is like, does Jacob Schaffelberg want to come off the bench? Does whenever Tyler Boyd gets injured, or whenever Tyler Boyd comes back from injury? I mean, we're gonna have him, Schaffelberg, and Kassam probably fighting for that spot, and I don't know. That's just something that I've been thinking about a lot recently. Is like I'm so grateful to have the depth, but the MLS I feel like is at like a level of competition and exposure that like if you're not the starting, like even the starting guys for some teams, people have no clue who they are. So what's good for their career, what's not. I went on a little tangent, but
No, I
with Shedeur, I mean that attitude does come into play. Unfortunately, I mean I feel like his dad still I feel like his dad is still a dad and wants the best for him. The same thing with like the if we can relate it to basketball for a second, I don't know how much you know about like LeVar Ball and the Ball brothers.
I
Uh,
remember LeVar Ball.
he was so outrageous and going on media tours where he was just saying the craziest thing, which brought a lot of attention. And I think like looking deeper into it and seeing him whenever he's sort of more off of that, kind of mentality, he seems like he's a very down to earth dude who just wants the best for his kids. However, some of that, like, some of building that fame to where you get your kids on a pedestal definitely hurts them. And maybe that's what Dion has done a bit in his, which I haven't really followed him just because that's out of my realm. But I feel like in his way of kind of building like names for his kids, he's also equally hurt their names by being this like kind of crazy over overreaching dad where NFL teams are like, we don't want this guy in the picture at all because he's definitely going to overstep boundaries.
Yeah, and there was some interesting, like, also theories specific to him that people were throwing out there where, before he got into coaching, he was working in the media. He worked for NFL Network for a while. He worked for CBS Sports for a while. So there were some theories that were kind of out there that, like, he's got a lot of friends in media. Maybe
Mm-hmm.
people were just like being a little nicer to Shedeur, kind of on the build up to the draft. Maybe some of his old buddies that were still working in TV were a little hesitant to like be as honest about Shedeur's talent level as they
Mm-hmm.
might be to like a quarterback who they don't have a relationship with that player's father. So maybe that,
Yeah.
that's why people were a little taken off, like, kind of the public was a little caught off guard by
Mm-hmm.
the way the NFL viewed his talent level. Whereas, like, you'd been told all season long throughout the college football season, like, oh, this guy's a top 5 pick, Heisman Trophy candidate, one of the best quarterbacks we've seen in years. And it's like, well, maybe they were just not willing to, like, be as mean to him as they might be to other quarterbacks because they like Dion and don't want to be, have Dion call them up and be like, what are you talking about my son on TV? What the heck was that all about? Or something like that. Or like
Yeah.
LeBron going after Stephen A. Smith,
Yeah.
when he was talking about it. It's like, I mean, hey, that, I know it's your son. I know I understand being a dad and like, trying to look out for your kids, but I mean, also that's kind of these guys' job is to like, assess athletes and how they perform. So, you kind of got to have a little self awareness there in some situations. And that could have been the case with, Shedeur, where people were like, I really don't have to deal with Dion if I say bad things about his kid. So I'm just going to like be like, he's got a good competitive drive and works hard and is a good athlete or whatever people were saying type stuff.
that makes total sense. I mean, that actually makes perfect sense. Which I think that's another case where it's like that's inevitably that's hurting your kid. However, I feel like you still, as a dad, you still are probably trying to do the best for your kid that you can. As a non dad, I'll never understand that until I have a kid. Um, but yeah, that was overall just surprising to see. I mean, I still wish Shador the best. I wish I hope he finds his success. I hope he maybe tones it down a little bit in the process. But that's just me also not really caring about the over personality players. But if we step away from sports a little bit, I kind of want to talk about kind of some life events that happened. As I mentioned earlier, I graduated college. I have a bachelor's degree in history now, so I'm excited to be unemployed for the next few years until until something else comes up. I plan on starting my master's at the beginning of next month in sports management. Oddly enough, completely different from history, but there's some updates about me. I saw Shane Gillis a few weeks ago live in Knoxville, and it was one of the most entertaining shows. Matt, I don't know how much you're into like the stand up comedy scene at all.
Oh yeah, big fan of Shane Gillis. I love stand up comedy. He's been one of my favorites over the last couple of years. Obviously, like, here in Nashville, like I'm actually like I wouldn't say I know Nate Bargatze, but I'm friends with
Mm,
people who are friends with Nate Bargatze. So followed
mm-hmm,
his career pretty extensively, going back to like, seeing him at Zanies before he blew up and was like filling arenas and stadiums and stuff like that. But yeah,
mm-hmm.
Shane Gillis is definitely a big one of my favorites. It's good to see him, doing well, because he had some rougher times a few years
Yeah,
back when he was maybe got caught saying some things he would probably shouldn't have said type stuff. But good to see him bouncing back and kind of getting a second chance and really making a good run of himself his career. Because I mean, his stuff is his hilarious. Like my TikTok algorithm is pretty much just like Shane Gillis and wrestling clips. So to see
yeah,
him do stuff is always good. I've loved him on. He's been on SNL a couple times the last couple years. It's been hilarious every time he's been on there. So good to see him out there and doing stuff. And I'm glad you got to go see him. I bet it was hilarious.
yeah. It was great. He I actually funny that you brought Nate. He like so I guess this is pretty common in like comedy acts where they don't really like announce an opening act like a musician will. Um,
Hmm.
so I was, trying to calculate who I thought would open for him, and I came to the conclusion myself. I was like, okay, well, it's probably going to be Nate because it's semi local, to Knoxville.
Hmm.
But it was actually is some Australian dude, and then another
Mm,
guy, and then the bigger opener was Matt McCusker, who he does Matt and Shane's Secret Podcast with, which was
that makes
super
sense.
sick to see. We were in Thompson Bowling Arena, which is the
Hmm.
basketball arena that UT Knoxville plays in, which I hadn't been to. So it's super cool to. I would like look at Shane performing on stage because we were like 4 or 5 rows from the stage, and then I'd look up and see like the retired UTK or like championship jerseys hung up, and it was super cool to see. And there's a whole a story about getting there where I met up with about there was probably 5 of us total that we all worked together, and we're like, okay, let's get together about an hour and a half before. We'll pregame a little. We're drinkers. I know Matt's not. Um, so we're like, we're going to drink a little before we go. We had a designated driver that was not drinking, so we were being responsible. And then of course, one person of the group was got there about an hour late. So we were just running with our heads cut off. At some point, we were driving into Knoxville, and the traffic was insane because there was a Shane Gillis show, and there was like a music festival that had like Creed, uh, Leonard Skinnerd, and just had like insane acts. So the traffic was insane. We couldn't find parking. 3 of the guys were like, okay, we're just gonna get out and we're gonna walk there. And then me and our designated driver, I was like, I'm not gonna leave him. That's messed up. So we eventually found parking. We made it to the stadium, and I thought that the other guys beat us, obviously. Uh, but they hadn't even made it there yet. 2 of the guys got
Mm,
like pissed off that they were walking in the rain and late, and they just decided to Uber home and miss the whole thing. So, so three
dang.
of us watched the show, and we had a great time. Is hilarious. He sang Rocky Top in a Trump impression, uh, which was just super super funny to see. But it was a great show. If he's coming near you, I would definitely go check it out.
Nice.
And then also, Matt, you're going on vacation, and probably you're leaving in a couple days, a week even. Where are you going? What are you doing for content? Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'm me and the wife are heading out for a vacation in Mexico, leaving out this weekend, be down there for a week, going to an all-inclusive resort kind of in the Cancun area. Kind of stuff we do this pretty much usually once a year, but this year we're kind of adding a second spring trip. We usually go in the fall, but same kind of place we've been several times. It's Bahia Principe is like the name of the resort chain that we usually go to. They're very good. They're great experience every time we go there. Pretty much you're kind of all inclusive food, beverage, drinkers. There's plenty to have there for those. But leaving out there, I usually do kind of a vlog each day, just kind of document what we do, and they're a little different than what I do in kind of my other vlogs. Like, sometimes in the Nashville SC videos, I try to be like maybe a little informed, oh, here's what club section's like or something like that. But more often than not, if I'm doing videos, it's just kind of documenting what I'm doing. And like, but with the Bahia ones, I started to notice like because I've been doing those for a few years on the channel, and I started noticing for whatever reason with those, like people would like kind of, reach out and be like, oh, hey, we're looking at this resort chain. We think it's going to be a good place for us to visit. What is this? What is it? Oh, people are actually like interested in like this place, and I can maybe like be more helpful than just me running around like, look at me, I'm eating a cheeseburger type thing. So I was like, I've tried to be like more like direct and informative about what we're doing, what the resort's like, kind of more review style than just like, hey, we're at a resort. Here we go. Here's me eating a burger. Here's me doing this or that. So that's fun. I always enjoy those. Those actually probably like the second most popular videos I do on the channel. It's like the National Sea stuff and that. And I'm like, these can't be the same audiences. This has got to be like completely different people watching all this stuff. But it's fun. I'm looking forward to that. It's always nice to get away and have a nice little trip and take a break from reality for a little while. But like I mentioned this to you, I don't know if we brought it up on the channel at all. The horrible luck of scheduling. We made these plans like back in probably like December before like the MLS schedule comes out. And so lo and behold, once the MLS schedule drops, the week I'm gone, Nashville SC somehow has 3 home games in a single week. Like I don't think that's ever happened before. Probably will never happen again. But like the one random time I'm like, first time ever, me and my wife are like, let's do a May vacation. We never go on vacation in May. Let's go on vacation in May. Nashville SC's like, hey, surprise, guess what? We're gonna put like half our home games in that one week while you're gone. So missing out on all the good Nashville SC content, but I don't think I'll be too sad while I'm sitting on the beach.
You'll be fine. And
I
remember,
think I'll
Matt,
survive.
the resort workers are gonna tell you, they're gonna offer you drinks, and you gotta say,
Sure.
hey, I'm not a drinker, but I don't want to be rude, so I'll drink these 10 drinks. I'm not a drinker, but I just don't want to be rude. So
Yeah, they do tend to do like a drink of the day, like a themed drink each day. Like someday it'll be like Bahama Mama or whatever. Like, maybe, hey guys, just so you know, they do a drink a day. I'm gonna sample it just for the content and just so everybody knows the full experience of what it's like to be a resort. Because it's not my way of doing things, but I don't want to exclude other people. So I'm trying to be all inclusive and bring light to every aspect of the resort. So there'll be a little bit of that there, I'm sure.
you're not gonna be happy about it, but you got to
No.
give people what they want. So
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
understandable. I remember one. I mean, for people, I'm sure I've touched on it a little bit, but I was a fan of your content, still am, but I was more of a fan before we started the show, before we met. Um, so I just try to catch up on all your content that I could, and I watched some of the vacation stuff. That's not really my style. I don't vacation often. But I saw one. I forget where you were. It may have been Mexico, maybe but you were sitting there eating, and like a family of raccoons just like came up and started
Oh
bothering
yeah.
you and your wife, like begging for food. And I'm like, dude,
hmm
I need to go there. Raccoons are one of my favorite animals. Where was that again? Because I need to book it there ASAP.
I think that was Mexico. I think that was the one where we've got the little. I don't know if they're like some type of raccoon-esque creature. I don't know what exactly their breed was, but yeah, they're like a. And it's really funny. I don't know how much I got this in the video, but it's like I feel so bad because like the staff is like constantly running around trying to run them out because it's like in like kind of open air side like poolside like lunch buffet area, and so like the staff is constantly trying to run them out and like no, get away good. And then the tourists, all of us are just there the whole time, just being like, oh hey, here, have a potato chip, and like they're like, stop feeding the raccoons, they keep coming around because you guys keep feeding them, and we're just like, huh, what? No,
I
but
mean,
they're cute. We want to feed them.
and it's, I mean, from like the video, I mean, most of the like wilder animals, I mean, they seemed like domesticated enough where they're not gonna like attack your legs or something. So
hmm
at what point is it like, hey, maybe we should market this as being a raccoon resort?
Yeah, animal encounters while you have your lunch. That's definitely what they promote.
uh I don't know, that's just hilarious to me. I know that like obviously there's a whole like saying of like the you feed a stray cat, it's gonna keep coming around.
hmm
But with like wild animals, that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Uh, and then I saw you upload a video recently. I only was able to watch half of it. You went and watched Thunderbolts and Sinners.
hmm
How was I've heard a lot about Sinners. Thunderbolts I've heard mixed reviews of, but Sinners I've just heard overall like very very outstanding reviews. Do you want to just get? Will you just give like a brief kind of overview and review of that?
Yeah, I mean it's without a doubt one of the better movies I've seen in like a long time. Like I think the last one I could really think of, and they're completely different style movies, completely different, reasons that I enjoyed them. But like the last one that I came out of the movie theater thinking was that good was probably like Oppenheimer going back a
Uh,
couple years. But very different movie. It's nowhere near as long as It's uh, really good pace, really good action. Keeps you on the edge of your seat. You're engaged the whole time. Yeah, I think the less I say about it, the better, because I think it's one of those like
yeah.
I knew obviously like who's in it. I knew who directed. I knew it was loosely somewhat of a vampire style movie, but I didn't really know anything else. I tried to stay as like spoiler free about as much as I could about it, so I kind of went in pretty cold, didn't know too much about it, so that kind of got me in. It does a really good job of just like drops you into the world.
Mm-hmm.
You kind of quickly kind of figure out who the characters are and learn what they're all about without like too much exposition and stuff like that. So, but just really good, like really entertaining, really engaging, really, Michael Jordan is always good, so he was another great
Yeah.
performance from him in this movie. So yeah, I would recommend, anybody who's thinking about seeing it that hasn't seen it yet, find a chance to go see it because that's pretty much how I ended up doing it. I've been wanting to go for a couple weeks, and this past Sunday it was like crappy rainy day in Nashville, nothing else to do, and it's like I'll just go to the movie and see two movies that I want to see anyway because I knew like with vacation coming up, it was probably my last chance to go to see movies because nowadays they're only in the theater for like 3 weeks it seems like before they drop out and go to streaming or whatever. So I was like, I want to see these in the theater. I want to see these on the big screen. I'm gonna go check it out, and I'm glad I did, especially with Sinners. Like Thunderbolts is good. I think it probably like my initial reaction to it was probably a little bit more positive just because Marvel hasn't had a good movie in a while. So to like see even like a halfway decent Marvel movie just felt like a refreshing, like, oh, here
Mm-hmm.
they did a good movie again. It's good to see them back sort of a little bit, but it maybe was not as highly, it's not like in the top tier like the
Mm-hmm.
Guardians movies or like the Endgame or even like some of the like the early Iron Man stuff, but it's
Yeah.
definitely a step in the right direction from where they had been recently. So it was good to see them kind of bounce back and kind of get a little bit of their footing back, and hopefully that leads into some new stuff because I'm pretty excited. They got obviously Fantastic Four is coming out later this year, so I'm
I'm
looking
so
forward to that. And
excited.
then yeah, and then the big return of Robert Downey Jr. is somehow playing Doctor Doom in the Doomsday movie. That we'll see what happens there. But yeah, it's glad to see them back to at least making a decent movie. So we'll see where they go from there. But yeah, Sinners definitely worth the time to check out.
Yeah, that's Sinners is another one that like I sitting here right now I have no clue what it's about besides there's vampires and Michael B. Jordan and that it's
Hmm.
supposedly really good. So I'll probably catch that whenever it comes to streaming.
Hmm.
But another movie that I was so upset to miss, which kind of ties into it, in theaters, which was Revenge of the Sith. I was
Mm.
so sad that I missed that re-release because you did a ranking a few days ago for May
Hmm.
4th, and I gotta say, Matt, I'm a little upset by it.
I'm sure.
Revenge of the Sith is my personal favorite Star Wars movie. Um, so
Hmm.
I was upset to be able to miss that. However, a few years ago, I caught Batman 1989 in theaters, which was like, okay,
Nice.
that's a cool experience. But Revenge of the Sith is probably my favorite Star Wars movie. And in my opinion, Empire Strikes Back doesn't even come close.
Wow.
Uh, and and I'll tell you why. As a kid, rewatching all the or watching all the Star Wars movies for the first time and then being obsessed with the world and rewatching them. Uh, some of our viewers now probably don't even remember DVD rental places. Uh,
Hmm.
but Empire Strikes Back was always rented out. So I only got to catch it like one or two times. So that plays a huge bit into me not liking it as much is because I have less tied to it emotionally.
Hmm.
Um, but even looking back, I this is gonna upset you and a lot of people probably. I think Return of the Jedi is better than Empire Strikes Back.
Yeah, I mentioned it in my video. I think like Return of the Jedi is, better than people give it credit for. Like back in the day, like there's been times when people have been really negative on it. People are like, oh, the Ewoks were just like a marketing thing to sell stuffed animals and blah 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 blah. And I'm always like, I thought it was pretty good. They pretty tied everything up in a nice bow. It was a pretty good ending to the saga. I'm not one of those people that's like gonna hate on that one, but
Mm.
I also think I've noticed something over like the last like couple years where it seems like I grew up kind of hating the prequels because like that was like I was in like that weird gap where like the first movies came out before I was born, and then I kind of come in, I watched like the tape, see the special editions when Lucas started redoing everything, and then so like I get into it that way, and then the prequels are going to come out. It's like, oh, finally, new Star Wars. People have been waiting 30 years for this, and then it was like, I think Revenge of the Sith is definitely much better than the other two, but like I think that those first two were just like, whoa, what are we doing here? But like there does seem to be like people of like the younger generation who were like that was their introduction to Star Wars, where like
Exactly.
they love it. That's the first, like you mentioned, they have the emotional connection. That was their entry point into Star Wars. Whereas like to me, I watched all those other ones a million, like you said, I watched the first three a million times before the prequels ever even came out. So like I had a long track record, a long history of watching those movies and having them be the ones that I was in love with and stuff like that. Whereas to your point, you're like you did the same with the next one, so that's your emotional connection to it. Like
Yeah.
I noticed it, like I think when like TikTok started coming out, and, like there's all these TikToks of like people obsessed with like the prequel trilogy. I was like, prequel trilogy kind of sucks. What are we doing here? And I was like, oh, all these people who grew up with those love those the way like people that grew up with the originals love those. I can have a little bit of appreciation for that. I can respect them. I still don't like the first one. First one's terrible. Second one's up and down. Revenge of the Sith
You don't like the
is
Phantom Menace?
no, I don't like that. That
Dude,
little kid just ruins it.
the Phantom Menace is so good.
Mm-mm.
It's genuinely top 4 Star Wars for me.
Mm.
It's so good. But hey, despite I hate to play this card because we're friends, Matt. I think it's like you said, a generation thing. However, I haven't seen any like 10, 12-year old on TikTok being like, you guys know what? 7, 8, 9 are the best Star Wars. So those are terrible.
Yeah, that's true. No, but nobody's really riding for those too hard. Although somebody like I can't remember if it was on the TikTok post or on my YouTube post of that video, somebody did come in and say that Rise of Skywalker was their favorite. And I was trying to be nice. I was like, I've never heard that before, but I respect your opinion. But I'm like, I don't think anybody has ever said Rise of Skywalker is their favorite Star Wars movie. So we don't.
You're the
If that's
only
that
person with this opinion.
Yeah, if that's that person, speak your truth. Ride with what you like.
Have you
But
kept
to
up
me,
with the shows at all?
I watched all of. I think I've watched all but like the second half of the third season of Mandalorian.
Mm-hmm.
Watched Boba Fett. I didn't watch Ahsoka because I never watched like whatever
Clone
it was,
Wars.
Clone Wars or Rebels, whichever one
Yeah.
she first came up in. So I wasn't that involved in her. I've watched the first season of Andor. I want to get back and watch the second season whenever I get back from vacation because that was really good. But yeah, that's kind of I didn't watch Acolyte or any of those, so there's a handful of shows I've missed. But I definitely watched Mandalorian and what did I just say? Andor. Yeah.
I've heard Andor is like some of the best Star Wars content to like exist. I haven't watched it personally.
Yeah, I think it's good because they kind of just like it's almost like they just made a good show and it just happens to be in the world of Star Wars. It's not like
Yeah.
they're not really like trying to pull too much from like the old content. They're just like if they had reset it and like just said it's not a Star Wars show, if it was just a random show set in a different kind of sci-fi space world, it'd still be a really good show. It just like it being a Star Wars show probably adds a little bit to it because if you like Star Wars, you're going to like anything pretty much to a certain degree that comes out Star Wars wise. But for that, it's one of those where I think they just decided, hey, let's just make a good show, and it just happens to be a Star Wars show. Because like that was one where I was like, because it's a prequel to Rogue One, and I'm like, why do I need to know like this secondary character from a already prequel movie? I don't need a prequel to them.
Yeah.
And it's not like it's like leading anything or giving you anything that's going to like make you appreciate the grander Star Wars universe more, but it's just a really good show. It's just interesting and compelling, the stuff they get into and how they kind of do everything. So I was like, oh yeah, this is a pretty good show.
I'm a person that, and we've gone completely off topic, and that's okay. That's what podcasts are for.
Yeah.
But I'm still a person that like, man, a Vader like horror story movie would have been so sick. Like a rated R Vader Logan-esque movie would have been amazing. And I don't know if you kind of feel the same about that, or if you're like, this is Star Wars, it should be this. But I think that would have been sick.
Yeah, I can totally see that because I know there's been like obviously like most popular like scenes of like the modern movies is more almost borderline horror-esque scene at the end of Rogue One where he's just like a complete just psycho killer just ripping through the people as he's coming down the hallway. And I know there's been some stuff in like the comic books that Marvel's been putting out the last few years that like kind of present him as more of that kind of full on like ruthless, just like the kind of evil, scary dude that he kind of seemed like he might be at the kind of when he was first
Hmm.
introduced type thing. So definitely could see something like that being a lot of fun, very entertaining.
And this is the last thing that I'll say before we kind of get back on topic. But we brought this up before, the like next Spider-Man trilogy in the MCU. I've heard that it's supposed to take a bit of a darker route, which I think will be super interesting. I don't. It probably says a lot about my character, but I always kind of gravitate towards the darker, more morally challenged storylines.
Hmm.
So I think that would be sick to see, especially in someone like Spider Man. Um, I lied about that being the last off topic thing. The new Superman trailer. Did you watch that? I'm
Hmm.
so excited for that. I've been trying to go
Yep.
back and rewatch the old Supermans because I never saw them. I only watched like Man of Steel. Um,
Hmm.
but the new Superman trailer looks so cool.
Hmm.
What do you think about it?
Yeah, I mean, it looks good. I mean, the guy they've got playing Superman now, he looks the part. The guy playing Lex Luthor looks really good.
Mm-hmm.
It's obviously directed by James Gunn, who did the Guardians for, you know, amongst the best of the Marvel movies, if not the best of the Marvel movies. So he's got a pretty good track record when it comes to bringing superheroes to the big screen. So, Superman's obviously a challenging one. Like there has much success with like his film adaptations in terms of like, the quality of them. So he's definitely something challenging about him. But I think if anybody can get it right, do it. It's definitely James Gunn has the track record to back it up and do
Yeah.
it. So I'm definitely looking forward to it. Superman was like the first comic character I got into. Like this is I feel like I've said this like 5 times and date myself and put myself out there, but like my first kind of like comic book thing was like the death of Superman in like 1992. I remember that was like a big like actual like news story to the whole world that they were going to kill off Superman in the comic
Mm-hmm.
books. And my dad was like, "Let's go to the comic book store and like buy these Superman comics. This sounds like this could be crazy." And so that was how we ended up doing it, just like us going and buying them. And then oh, I like Superman. I like all these comic books. Let me read all these comic books. Oh, there's this guy called the Green Lantern that showed up over here in the Superman comic. Now I need to go buy the Green Lantern comic there. And so it just spiraled from there. So for like the age of like 10 to 14, I was like, I didn't even get an allowance because it was just like, oh, I'm going to go to the comic shop on Wednesday and buy 15 books that I don't need and probably will rot my brain a little bit. But now it's formed 90% of what I'm into is like me. I don't know if you can tell, but like brief bottom of this poster is like a poster that's like the cover to Amazing Fantasy number 15. So yeah, it's like sports wall, nerd wall. And there's a wall over there that has some pictures of my animals. That's my decoration.
I
Nerd stuff, sports stuff, animals.
and I think that's why we click because I'm the exact same way. You can't see these walls, but it's like movie covers, album covers, and then like I would have sports back here in my old dorm. Um, I feel like Superman's such a weird character in the sense of like he's like basically invincible besides this like green element. So
Mm-hmm.
like how do you make that interesting in a sense? I haven't gotten super into Superman. Maybe next episode I'll be able to be like, "Hey, I watched all the Superman movies. This is really what's going on" because I'm kind of
Mm-hmm.
ignorant right now. Um but I kind of want to circle back around to being a little bit more on topic to sports. NBA playoffs we talked about a bit. We talked about the Lakers kind of super team with Luka Doncic and LeBron James. They got knocked out of the playoffs
Mm-hmm.
by the Minnesota Timberwolves. They were talking a little bit of smack before to Anthony Edwards, who's the shooting guard for the Timberwolves, and he's one of those guys that he no one's going to touch Kobe and Michael's skill level. However, Edwards has that mentality of like, if you start to doubt this guy, he's gonna show out. And I feel like he did the entire series of the Timberwolves versus Lakers, and the Lakers got out. And so I don't know if I can say I was, you know, if I didn't expect that coming. However, uh, now the Timberwolves are facing my Warriors, which I had predicted previously to win it all. Um, they played their first game yesterday, and Stephen Curry got hurt. It should
Mm-hmm.
be. He's probably going to miss the next game. He may come back. He like sprained his left ankle, I believe, which is
Mm-hmm.
his first ankle sprain of his career. However, he is older. This is one of those injuries where you can just kind of break it down to him being an older player,
Mm-hmm.
but it definitely impacts their chances, especially in this series versus a team that has Edwards, Gobert, uh, everything else in the playoffs have looked playing. Have you kept up with it at all?
Yeah, I just kind of followed it through like social media and stuff. Mostly, I haven't had a lot of chances to tune in and watch much of the games. But I was kind of like you talked a lot about Anthony Edwards, and like I was, I think it was somewhat surprising they won, just because there was so much hype around obviously LeBron and then Luca coming to LA. But there was part of me that was kind of like, I feel like I remember last year, like people were like you kind of mentioned were like talking about Anthony Edwards, like he was going to be like the next big superstar of the league, and like they had a pretty good run. They didn't make it to they made it to what the conference finals last year, and so I was kind of like, well,
Yeah,
maybe like people just kind of forgot or was like sleeping on the Timberwolves a little bit just because there was so much hype around the Lakers. I was like, the Timberwolves were like pretty solid and seemed like they were kind of building towards something going forward. Yeah, but it's been interesting in the playoffs so far because it really seems like just kind of as a casual follower of the NBA, it seems kind of I think I guess the Thunder and the Celtics are kind of the two
hmm
favorites, but I mean it does kind
yeah,
of seem like that it's maybe a little more wide open than what you see in some of the other professional sports where really there's only the two or three best teams are just way ahead of everybody else. It seems like even though the Celtics and the Thunder are kind of the favorites, even I mean because they both lost their first game in this round, so there's clearly like a little bit of not full invincibility to anybody in this league. It's kind of like it seems like it's a little bit wide open for who could win it all.
yeah. I think that's what's made it so exciting to follow along this season is that every year I've followed along with the NBA. That's been even before I was super into sports. I was super into basketball. Um, but with this year, I mean, it feels different in the sense that like I think literally anyone has a chance at catching a good streak of games, at beating their opponent. I feel like anyone could take it this time. I'm still confident in the Warriors. That's my team. Um, but I, eh, no matter what in the playoffs, it'd be Warriors or Grizzlies. That's who I'd be rooting for. Um, but it feels like this playoff year could go literally any way, which is that's exciting for a league. A little worrisome whenever you're rooting for a specific team, but definitely if you're new to basketball, I would say tune in to as many playoff games as you can, and you might find it very interesting to watch just the high level of talent, high level of skill. Um, and you could base your next favorite team off of that. So next Saturday, May 10th at 8:30 p.m. Eastern time, Nashville SC plays against Charlotte again at home. We know Charlotte this season has been a force to be reckoned with whenever they're playing at home. Now we're taking them out of their element to play away. Uh, what are you expecting to see out of this first kind of stretch of these like May home games for Nashville?
Yeah, I mean it's weird to talk about how important games in May could be, but I mean to get an opportunity like this to have actually, we have, I think, counting the away cup match that we just had, we're gonna have, I think, 5 total home games in May because we've got these 3 in 1 week, and then there's one, like, right at the end of the month, May 31st, I think we come back home for that one. So,
Mm-hmm.
to have that many home games together, it's like, a really good chance to kinda really build yourself up into a strong position for the rest of the season, get yourself up into a high position in the table to where you can take a few losses later on in the season that maybe you would rather not take, but they're not going to hurt you as much if you put together a good streak here because you kind of need to put this together because obviously if you just kind of do the math, if you're playing this many home games right now, obviously that means there's going to be a lot of road games later on. So you want to build yourself up, be pretty strong through this stretch to where when we have all those road games in the later part of the season, we've built ourselves a nice little cushion up. And if you kind of look at who we're playing, Charlotte just saw them just like a couple weeks ago. So if it's a fresh opponent, that's fresh on our minds, wouldn't expect it to be too different from what we saw in the first matchup, which, I think the scoreline didn't go our way, but I think we played pretty well in that matchup. And, couple balls bounced a little differently, we could easily have won that game. And so, like
Yeah.
you mentioned, coming home, getting them away from their home stadium, which has really been their strongest point, that's a good thing in our direction. And, we've started to find that form a little bit, looking at 7 goals against Chicago, getting the one against Atlanta when they were kind of doing everything they could to just park the bus and not let anything happen.
Hmm.
It feels pretty good. Like we're starting to click. We're starting to get some things going there. So that feels like a pretty good one. And then we're literally just like replaying the first half of the season because we play Red
Yeah.
Bulls right after that. Then DC United, who's been struggling pretty good this season. Toronto, who's consistently, amongst the worst, in the league. Tough match against Columbus, and then wrapping up with NYCFC, who's kind of middle of the road right now. So they're very winnable games in this stretch here. It's going to be a really really good opportunity for Nashville SC to stack some points and maybe hopefully build up a good position as they go into the second half of the season. Charlotte, like we mentioned specifically, I don't expect it to be too different than what we saw, whatever it was, like 3 or 4 weeks ago when
Hmm.
we played them. They've got Zaha, they've got a Aubameyang, the striker, so they've got some dangerous players. But I like our attack. I like what we've been doing lately. So I'm hoping that this should be a good opportunity to pick up 3 points.
Yeah, and I agree. I mean, I think New York Red Bulls has looking a little bit further. I think they've dropped a little bit down in expectations from the beginning of the season, where they're now at 10th in their standing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think with the home advantage, we should be looking pretty good there. But against Charlotte specifically, I mean, taking them out of their home where they had their home advantage standpoint, and where they're favored to win there, and we arguably held our own, had a terrible injury, and then still ended up not doing terrible as a team. I think here we can take it. I think it'll be if I had to predict a score, let's say a 2-1 Nashville win. Um, I'm hoping to see Walker back soon. I don't know if it's going to be this game against Charlotte. That would be nice to see him come back, bump in a header for a goal. That would be great. I don't know if that's going to happen, but I think we go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, I was just gonna. I can't remember if I mentioned this, and I think I did in the game vlog from the Open Cup match. His wife and like kids, and it looked like it must have been some other family members were sitting like right in front of us at the game.
Oh,
Which
nice.
obviously, yeah, I'm like I don't know that that necessarily like is really telling you anything about his health status, but I mean, I was kind of like, well, one, I was like, oh, that's pretty cool to have a wife who's just gonna like go watch the team even if you're not playing type thing.
Yeah.
Like she's like that's a pretty ride or die wife to have with you there. So good job, Walker. You did well. But also it's like I feel like if he was I don't know struggling or not doing well with like issues from the concussion,
Hmm.
is she going to be just going to soccer games and stuff like that and like kind of not being around checking on him and stuff like that. So I was kind of like it's like that kind of made me like I feel like he must be doing pretty good. You never know with concussions how long it can be. So I mean that I'm not saying that I saw his wife at a game. He must be coming back this week or something like
Yeah.
that. But I mean that felt like a good sign for whatever reason to me. I was like, oh well, if she's out here cheering on the team, that's got to be pretty good for him. And I know he's been at there's like this weird. I don't know if you've ever seen it. There's like this weird like hidden kind of terrace. Like if you look up at Geodis Park, like
Hmm.
where the press box is,
Hmm.
at the very end of that, there's this weird, like small, like just kind of balcony. And it's not like, there's no concession stands or anything like that that's at like the other ones. And if you look up there during a game, usually the players that aren't in the match day squad, at certain points in time, they'll come and go, but they'll be sitting up there watching the match from there. And I saw him
Okay.
at a couple of games ago sitting up there, which, once again, another good sign, concussion. If he's still having issues from it, can't play. But if he's healthy enough to
Hmm.
kind of come out and watch the match and be out there, that's a sign that it's not like he's not bedridden and just like being
Yeah.
completely incapacitated with like, headaches and stuff like that. So just weird little things like that where I'm like, that makes me feel good that he's, doing okay, because ultimately that's what you want more than anything is for, him to be okay. Cause, head injuries can be very scary and very unpredictable. But, I was like, oh man, his wife's at this game. That's an interesting little turn of events. But we were also like, we were kind of joking, like, hey man, couldn't he got his wife some better seats? She not get a luxury box or something like that. we were like, why is she sitting down here with us common people? She should be up in a luxury box or something. But it was just kind of funny that she was like right there because
Yeah.
she's very recognizable because like they uh her and him are both like tall, blonde, look like
Hmm.
they're just gonna have like super Thor babies that are gonna future Nashville SC stars probably because like my one of my friends very similar. He's got a brother who's tall blonde. That's married to a tall blonde. So I've always compared like his wife and brother to Walker and his wife. I'm like, God, if we get these two families to like get all their kids on the same team, US is gonna win the World Cup someday with these just like super tall blonde Thor babies. But
Yeah.
yeah, that was just a little interesting wrinkle Walker related that came up recently.
Yeah, that's just super interesting that I haven't heard that from anywhere else. So there's a Uncle Matt exclusive for the 615 Locker Room podcast, potentially his vlogs. Um, so I hope to see him back soon. You know, you want to see your captain back, which I think with the concussion, it should be probably any day now. I would think, if he isn't considering other options. But I'm excited for these next little stretch of games. I'm confident in our team. I'm excited to watch us play, um, and I think that we should pick up 3 points in a few Saturdays. So on that note, I'm going to close this out. It's been the 615 Locker Room Podcast. Don't forget to check Wormy and Uncle Matt out on YouTube, Twitter, and all the other social media platforms. For the next few games that Matt is out on vacation, I instead of doing a podcast that week, I feel a little weird about doing that. So we're just going to instead do live watch alongs. Those will be included on the YouTube to watch after the game. You pop in, ask questions, whatever. That will be available on our YouTube. Those will not be uploaded to the Spotify just because of personal preference. I think putting like a watch along on Spotify is weird. Um, so that's what you can expect for the next 1-2 games, I think. And then whenever Matt gets back, it should be back to regularly scheduled programming. Uh, do you have anything to close us out with, Matt?
Yeah, I'm gonna be trying to tune in and see how those go, jumping in the chats if I can, because I'm gonna try to keep up with the team as much as I can while I'm on vacation. The luxurious thing about Apple TV is it goes worldwide, so I can pretty much watch the games wherever I go. But yeah, I just want to say congratulations top of the show. That's a huge, awesome accomplishment. I wish I had graduated a little bit faster than I'm supposed to take to graduate. So, getting it done, being able to kind of like, start doing whatever you're going to do next, whether it's going for your master's or, finding something to do with a history degree. That was one of the slowed me down was I was a history major for a while and
Mm.
probably too late in the game. I was like, I don't know if I can do anything with this. I might need to change course and figure something out. But then I was like, oh, maybe I'll be a teacher. And I was like, I don't know if I want to deal with kids. And yeah, I was in college way too long. You did a good job getting out graduated, so congratulations to you.
I appreciate that. But yeah, check us out on social media. Thank you, Matt, for saying those kind words. Um, and then we'll see you next week with the live stream, and then I'll kind of keep posting on the 615 Locker Room Podcast Twitter to update whenever we'll be back to regularly scheduled programs. Uh, that has been it. Y'all have a great week, and thank you for listening.